Friday at 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. It's a show about technology and helping people work together. So we invite you, if you're joining us live on YouTube, Twitch, Periscope, your platform of choice, you can go ahead and ask us questions. We'd love to hear from you. And then if you want to join us on the show, guess what? We're going to put up a link on Discord to be able to join our community, talk to us, be our friends. We're real people, and we'd love to talk to you. So today on the show, we're going to talk about hiring remotely. It's something situation that we're in, but we're going to talk about maybe some of the challenges that are inherent in this process, how you can thrive in the environment as someone who is being interviewed or as someone interviewing someone, and also how small businesses can really, and startups can take advantage of this opportunity to add talent to their team that they wouldn't necessarily otherwise look for. So to begin, we'll maybe just share our personal experiences on being hired or interviewed remotely. And let's begin with Neil, since he's joining us today. Neil, I know that it's been a little bit of time. We talked about it earlier since you've been hired remotely, but how was that experience for you? And kind of what are the things that you used and how did it make you feel?
Yeah, it was a first time I had ever been remotely interviewed. Although I had been working online for a while before that and been doing my own web design work and, didn't always have clients in front of me. It was my first time actually getting hired through that process. But back then we were using Skype. And I think I mentioned this before the call, but one of the things that was interesting was after the first interview, I didn't have much of a concept of the culture or the feel of the company other than what the interviewee was giving me. He kind of gave me a little bit of a synopsis of the work they do, but I didn't get to meet anyone. I didn't get a feel for their office. They were 100% remote too. I was just talking to a guy who was working out of his kitchen, and he made it very professional, but it still took me a couple of more interviews and a couple of more times online with them to understand the look and feel of the company before I got there. So that was very different from other interviews I've been to. Obviously, walking into a brick and mortar company or business, you get a real good feel for who they are from what you see in that first few minutes. And that was something I didn't get, which was an interesting way to be introduced to a company.
You didn't get intimidated by the huge mahogany desk or how cool everyone looked.
It's a lot harder to signal over your kitchen.
Yeah, I think I would agree. I think it's kind of one of those things, like you, on the one hand, you don't get intimidated by those things that we would typically, in a face-to-face in an office, be intimidated by per se. But like, then the other thing it is also, there is that barrier being comfortable talking to that person still. So I had that experience being interviewed remotely. It was a company that I had read about and had some, some, I guess you could say, some respect for. And then we set up interview time, and the person conducting the interview is like in their pajamas in their kitchen. Their cat's or their dog is running around the background and stuff. And there's someone walking in and walking out. And it was a jarring experience because I had expected this one thing and then gotten something completely different, and kind of after the first 5 minutes of the conversation, it's like, oh, okay, hold on a second. I still, even though I have taken a lot of care into what is seen, doesn't mean that the person given the interview was, for sure. That's tough.
It's like showing up overdressed, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's a little uncomfortable at first, but then you just kind of got to roll with it.
Yeah, I definitely worn a suit in an in-person interview where I shouldn't have.
And then it granted you success, or were you on the side?
Yeah, I don't think in that case it helped me at all. Really, it was not a job where anybody wore business clothes. It's just a mistake I made as a young person of you have to look for the nicest you can all the time. I'm so into the the debate right now between whether or not you should try to look nice on camera, depending on whether or not everyone else is looking as nice. Because I've seen a few articles like Forbes kind of talking about, specifically, I think it was the guy from Sandwich Video, talking about that it's a bad signal to show up with nicer video. I don't know if I agree with that, but that's what I was thinking of conscientiously. It's just like, yeah, there is a little bit of awkwardness there, but I don't know if it's wholly bad.
Oh, that's interesting. Like talking about cues, like we all get cues, when you're interviewing or even just having a discussion with somebody, you get like kind of cues by different, maybe things that we don't even consciously think about. Yeah,
like Neil was just talking about how the environment of that interview on the interviewee side, like the person conducting the interview with him was throwing him off, and it's like, I think it's hard to remember in this day and age that with a forced frame kind of around everyone, that like, there's still a lot of but there's still a lot of things to be sorted out as far as what is a good way of going about this, which is why we're talking about interviewing right now. But like that whole thing of video quality is a huge part of it, because the connection gets realer and realer, but if it's one-sided, it's one-sided, right? It's like it's realer and realer for one person, but maybe not for the other person.
Oh, for sure. I think, I want to hear these beautiful insights, Elliot, but
you're still muted, Elliot.
Hey, this is live. It happens. That's what happens. I know Elliot will join us here back in just a
he'll
sec.
get live eventually. We're all trying our best today.
Yeah. But no, I think the other thing is, is that just to kind of go on a side tangent for a minute, do you think that there should be some kind of like, previously it's like, okay, I'm going to interview, I'm going to go into this company, I'm going to give them my resume and whatever. But do you think that there should be like a standard kind of protocol or etiquette for interviewing over like video?
Hey, I'll chime in on this.
Do it.
So you show up for a job interview in real life, face to face, and there's etiquette, right? You want to look presentable. You want to make sure you have good hygiene, right? You don't want to show up stinking. And you're prepared to do the interview. Well, the same goes, I think, for if you're interviewing remote, right? They don't have the smell through the camera yet, like Elliot wants to invent, but you still want to represent yourself as having good hygiene. That would come off through your video as well. And then I think it's the same goes for the person interviewing you. They don't need to be in the kitchen in their pajamas. They need to be in their work attire that you would wear to the workplace. I mean, it reflects not only yourself, but it reflects the company that you're applying for. So I remember talking to Elliot years ago, and the concept of working from home was so crazy to me because I was in the construction industry, and every day I got in my truck and drove to a different job site. And I said, man, you must love working from home because you never get dressed. You're just like in your pajamas all day with your shoes off. And he's like, no, that's not how it works. Like, I get dressed, I put my shoes on, and if I don't do that, then I don't feel like I'm in work mode, right? So you wouldn't go get in your car and drive to work in your pajamas. The same goes for applying for a job and working remote and all that. You need to get in the habit of getting dressed and presenting yourself to people the way you would in public.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea, because I think there's a lot of value in being able to understand empathetically the reasons that would cause someone to legitimately not be able to appear so great on camera. So some of those are like access to technology, some of those are access to broadband, some of those are like technical proficiency. It's a lot of things that can be at times out of people's direct control. But a major difference is that for an interview, that's like kind of like a known event. And so while I think it is pretty professionally acceptable to chime in to a meeting kind of haphazardly in a professional setting in this moment in time, I think in the future it's going to get less so. But for an interview, yeah, it's really hard for me to wrap my head around that. If I were to interview somebody and they showed up looking like they hadn't really thought about the fact that they were going to do that today, it would be hard for me to ignore that, even though I don't think it's the greatest indicator of whether or not they're going to be a great worker. for a remote work person, it is a little bit of an indicator of a lack of awareness of what they're even trying to get into. And in my opinion, obviously people can grow and you can train people to be aware of it.
No, that's a super interesting point, because I think it's like if you already are having such a hard time communicating in this format at the beginning, it's like, okay, well, if this is going to be the way we communicate for the foreseeable future, then maybe we're going to just have a hard time communicating and not be able to work together in a really kind of cohesive way. I think that's fair. But
Neil, with your experience earlier, I didn't mean to cut you off when I started talking about it, but like, did you end up getting around that lack of like company vibe that you got on that interview? Was there a way that got worked around, or it was just over time you eventually learned the culture through the interactions?
Yeah, it wasn't very long after that. As I said, maybe it was, I'm trying to remember exactly how it worked. There was an interview, then there was a project, like a test project that I would work on for an hour or two. And that started with the same person coming to the call, explaining the task, leaving me on my own for a few hours, and then coming back and wrapping up. And then the third one was I had an interview with the three owners. Now the company's gotten big enough now where that's not possible anymore, but they still try to meet everyone once they're hired, which is a really nice aspect to it. But after those three things, I felt like I got enough of an idea of the culture. I felt much more relaxed. When I actually got introduced to the rest of the team, I had a pretty good idea of how everything was being ran. The person interviewing me ended up being my manager anyways, so that was nice. I didn't have to go from an interview, a person conducting the interview, and then have to meet a whole other person to work with and get used to them. So it after that first hurdle and understanding what the company was and the vibe there, it became pretty quickly that was the norm. That's how they worked.
I have a question too, Neil. If you don't mind, I was going to ask, like, since you're using Skype, which is something that a lot of people have used for a long time, or for the last 5 to 8 years at least, to do those kinds of things, and it's something that people are still using in addition to other platforms. Like, did you find like there was maybe an inherent, or not an inherent, but did you find that there was like kind of things that you had to work around with that platform, or with that way of speaking with somebody else? Like, was it like, I know, like, I'll give you an example. Like, we were talking about this earlier. It's like for Zoom, it's such an aggressive gate on the sound that you sometimes, even if you're just talking over someone like just a microsecond, it could just knock everybody out, or it could kind of cause a little awkward lag in the conversation. Were there any of those things that you remember being an issue when you were having discussions with everyone at Modern Tribe?
No, I can't think of anything that was a barrier at first. We heavily depended on the chat function, the chat room functionality of Skype as well. At the time, we were trying to use Skype as Slack before Slack was even invented, which was really interesting. Once Slack came out, it was such a nice breath of fresh air that we moved over to that. And I think it only took us like a day or two to be like, yeah, we're not going back to Skype again. That was terrible. But the meeting aspect of it was an interesting one, because now we have Zoom and we have Google Hangouts, and people join that. For Skype, it was the backwards way. It was the person starting the call had to call everyone, and it was like your computer actually rang, and it was that took me a while to get used to that. I had to be at my computer and then waiting for the call to join. That was an interesting way of having to get around that. But yeah, as a platform, it worked. Everyone had fun on it. With lots of GIFs, lots of emojis and stuff like that. And it was a very new way to communicate, which I actually started to really enjoy pretty quickly.
Nice. Elliot, I want your perspective, if we can, as someone that's given interviews over or hired people remotely. What has been maybe a good experience you had? I think you were mentioning one earlier that I thought was pretty funny.
Yeah, so I've hired a lot of actually international teams, and we were using English as the language for the interview, but many of the people that I was interviewing, English was not their first language. So very thick accents, difficult to understand a lot of times what word I was saying or what word they were saying. So we had to really slow down and leave enough time. And also, I would try really hard to, there's a big power imbalance in the interview. And so I would try really hard for that, everything that I'm asking them, that I'm sharing first the same information about me, right? Like, oh, hey, I see your interview says you went to this school. Like, I didn't finish college. Like, what, was that useful for you? Or, what I really wanted to get to as quickly as possible was not to test like basic competency, but to see whether this person could explain how they solved problems in a way where it was obvious they were going to do well on the team. I was hiring for engineering teams, development teams, and it's all about problem solving. And so I wanted to hear them talk about something that they had successfully solved and hear about how they solve problems. My favorite interview, we were talking about this in the pre-show, was a guy that was just no nonsense. He's like, I'm not working before noon. Like, we can't have our meetings that early in the morning. Like, I don't get up before noon. Like, resume, that's stupid. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to send you a YouTube video. I'm like, all right. And the YouTube video is a robot that he built and programmed doing watercolor paintings. And so the interview was me. I'm like, oh, I definitely got to talk to this guy. The interview was us talking about the engineering problems he solved with the robots. I thought it was amazing. He told me the 37 ways that it was terrible. And I was like, this is somebody that needs to be on our team. He is now head of software for a big international satellite company. His code is running in space. Like, it was immediately clear, even though there was a very thick accent and language, the conversation wasn't very fast and free flowing. It was immediately obvious from talking to this person that he could communicate, he could solve problems, and he was somebody we wanted to have on our team.
But what about his ATS scores?
We didn't even use that at the time.
That's cool though. I like that story because when we were going over on the pre-show, I thought about how embracing you embraced those awkward silences, or you allowed room for that in the interview process. And I think that's the big thing that people, especially as an interviewer, can do and be successful at, and helping to get people comfortable with this arrangement, is to allow room, allow space for those things to happen, and not have it be this like, okay, I'm gonna wait till you talk, or you're gonna wait till I talk, or a kind of more formal, maybe contractual communication.
And so much of that can be smoothed over by taking 30 seconds or a minute at the beginning to sort of restate what your expectations are for the interview. Especially, you're the person leading the interview. You should say, like, listen, I want to keep this informal. Please pipe up and let me know. I want to take 10 minutes to introduce myself and the company and what we're about. I want to talk to you for about 40 minutes about your experience, and I want to leave 10 minutes at the end for questions. If we get reconnected, here's what I'll try. If we get disconnected, here's what I'll try and do. And do you have the full hour available? Are you expecting any interruptions? Like, you just restate sort of what you're expecting, and that can go so far to put them at ease and make it go smooth.
That housekeeping and that etiquette, that meeting etiquette, that awareness of what you're actually trying to overcome as obstacles in the communication is so helpful, because I think it's really common, just because of the way technology tries to present itself to us so often, that as human beings, we just generally do this skeuomorphism thing where we try to just like make it just like it is physically. Yeah. Just do it. Just make it like it is physically. So when we're in the same room with everybody, we never talk about where the exits are. But that's actually a terrible practice. One of the first things that should happen at a large group gathering is everybody should be told what to do if an emergency happens, so they can leave the building and be safe. And so like we forget about that in these virtual settings, where it's like, that's a panic moment for somebody emotionally. That's a trauma now associated with your brand, your company, the interview, their relationship with you, because like you just dropped the ball on guiding them towards the exits before you had an emergency at home, where your internet went out or whatever. And that's a massively important point, I think, is to just realize that to have the good relationship start, you have to actually invest in it. Even though you don't know in that interview if you're going to hire that person or not, it can't be an insincere, like, I don't actually want to get to know you type interaction because it's virtual. It can't just be like, I see so many postings of people saying, I had 3 interviews at this company and I've heard nothing back from them. And I'm like, how can you talk to a human being over and over again, or have multiple team members talk to them and never tell them that you're done talking to them? But
you spent thousands of dollars.
Yeah, it's really silly to me to waste that time if you're not going to even be able to let them know what's happening. But that's a very good indicator, I think, for someone who's being interviewed. If they get on an interview and nobody orients them, that company is signaling hugely to you that they do not know how to manage remote work.
No, that's don't know. Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Elliot. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, it's cool. And the other thing that happens automatically when we're in person that is so easy to forget about is we have a lot of shared context about what's happening outside the desk that we're sitting at, right? And so we are very sympathetic to the other person when we're both meeting in the same office and we both know that it's snowing outside and we both know how much work it was to show up to the meeting on time and how we had to spend an extra hour digging our car out that morning. But when I'm sitting in Florida and somebody else is sitting in Canada and like, I have no, like, it's a beautiful sunny day here. What do you mean? Why are you out of breath? Like, what's going on? I have no sympathy or empathy for how much extra work you had to do that day. And so that's another reason why it's so important to allow a little extra time, share what it's like where you are, ask what it's like where they are, and just try and understand where the other person is coming from a little more. It goes a long way towards that interview being a positive thing. Whether they're right for the job or not, like, it goes a long way towards it being a positive experience.
I remember that in mine as well. There was the guy taking the interview did ask a lot about that stuff, and that was, now that I've been in the company for a while, that was very much on purpose. The live-work balance was really important to them. They wanted to make sure that they were hiring someone who knew how to take a break if they needed it. So they asked a lot about, where you are in the world, what you do for fun. And he even shared a lot of his stuff as well. He lived in San Francisco. He loved vinyl. He made his own ketchup and sold it at farmers markets. I found that all out in that first interview, and that did settle me as well. I was able to be a little bit more open and be able to give him a little bit of an idea of who I am and who I am outside of my work as well.
The flavor of what each human being actually is so hard to get virtually, because it is a bit of a performance, right? Like we were talking about before, how you create the frame around yourself, whether you do it deliberately or accidentally or haphazardly, whatever, you still made a choice there. And then you have to kind of deliberately bring some real stuff, I feel like, or at least a vulnerability to have whatever it ends up being. Like, maybe you're going to talk about the ketchup you make, maybe you're going to talk about how you really didn't feel like your college was worth it or whatever, but just some real, actual, authentic something about yourself, which is a hard state to get into for me when I'm trying to be on, I think. And so, one thing I was going to mention connected to that is a friend of mine was telling me he's been having these little client meetings for people he does teaching with, and he's been doing mindfulness sessions before it because his day is different and they're not always at the same time. And so one thing, if I have any interviews in the near future that are remote, I'm going to try to do is do a mindfulness session before I actually start the interview so that I can be a little bit more conscientious about that. It's a short interaction, but man, if you get all of the signals wrong at the beginning of it, it's so hard to recover from.
Do you know if does he communicate that with the people he's speaking with beforehand?
No, it's just something he's doing because he has a lot of social anxiety. And so he realizes that this is good for all times I have social anxiety, not just times where I'm going to a general crowd. And from what he's told me, it's been a really helpful thing to get himself in the correct mindset to be having a very genuine interaction, as opposed to in a frantic, panicked, scrambled thing where you forget that there's another human being on the other side of the screen that you're trying to get to cooperate with you.
So is it, and I'm just curious. So does it go, does he do that with the person, or is that
No, this is before.
He talks with them? Okay.
Yeah,
gotcha.
This is before. It's just for his personal, getting himself in a calm, relaxed, real state of mind, as opposed to kind of just whatever state he ended up from how his day was before he got on that call,
That's super interesting. I think that's, things like that, I think, are what will help people integrate a real interview process or a real hiring process over video and have it be just as powerful as it would be if it were in person.
Yeah, it was a real insight moment for me of just realizing that like there's a cool aspect to having something you're using yourself in your personal life, and then with this remote work world that's becoming the standard or has become the standard now, a lot of that stuff still applies, and it's not as strange as maybe it might have been in the office to get 10 minutes to do some deliberate like settling down so that you can have a good interaction.
I think that's too, like it's kind of like putting on like clothes that you think that you look good in, and like going out and doing the thing that you want to do. I think on like the technical side of things, because I think people rely too much on too much technically on, okay, I'm going to conduct a interview with someone. I need to be able to have this software and this and this and this, which is important. Mm-hmm. But I think I think there is a technological component to this where it could be like your favorite clothes. Like, okay, I can do that mindfulness session if I'm also comfortable with my tools I use, which I think a lot of people that are doing interviews and getting interviews are not comfortable with the tools they use.
So that's another thing to ask, right? Is when you're setting up the interview, just tell them like, hey, I like doing video because of X, Y, Z. Do you have any strong preferences or needs, or like, is there anything we can accommodate for you? Sometimes the language thing, we ended up doing an awful lot on chat, or there was severe bandwidth limitations in some of the cities people were being interviewed from, and so we would do phone and chat, and the chat was helpful because there was no accent, right? So there was no guessing like which word it was, but ask if there's accommodations that you can make. Like, it's okay to say like, I prefer X, Y, and Z, but ask, what the person needs. And that can go a long way towards helping them present the best version of themselves.
Yeah. I think too, companies can, if you're hiring from an organizational standpoint, like you can be able to present yourself in a way and use software in a way that will help you to do that. I know recently I had a friend that said that they were doing an interview and they got a link from www.freeonlinemeeting.com, which is like, the person just Googled literally, what can I use to do this?
It's a booming business and we got the best in business class.
Exactly. And of course, it was buggy and it barely worked, and they had to
today
rearrange.
On infrastructure that will infect your computer while you get a job. That's so bad. That is so bad.
That was pretty funny.
I don't want to begrudge people using tools that are available for free, that they're in a real situation. But there's this other fallacy that happens where there are people who are making money in a marketplace and they refuse to pay what is necessary to do well in it. And that's what I'm really bemoaning. If you need a free tool, please use it. I'm 100% pro free tools. But if you're running a business that makes money, give people some dignity.
Yeah, and if you're hiring, if you're a recruiter, if that's your job, then you need to be able to have the tools to do that job.
If I really wanted to hire a professional person, I feel like they would be smart enough to be suspect of me as them hiring if I'm sending them a link to a free tool to meet with me. Like, it's like telling someone to meet you in a back alley on the internet.
and that's another thing, kind of like going back to what we were talking about before. It's like it's a cue that maybe this opportunity that you're interviewing for it's not an opportunity that you want to have or that you want to be a part of.
I think we're going to see more and more of
that. You have to remember the person who is conducting the interview is being paid to do it. The person who is showing up to the interview is not being paid to do it. And so you really, if you are the person who is conducting the interview, you owe it to your whole company to do a good job and represent them well.
Yeah, if you read Glassdoor, you can see the attrition on not doing a good job.
Yeah, I can't imagine that the person doing that interview couldn't have went to someone higher up and said, hey, listen, like, we're doing some remote interviewing now. This is the new thing. Do you guys care if we, use some dedicated funds here to pay for whatever subscription to whatever platform so that we can actually represent the company as professional and what it is, or what I hope it is. Not like, oh, hey, come on, we're going to do our interview in the outhouse today. Like,
no, for real.
crazy.
I think it's a little bit crazy sometimes to let a company do that much damage to themselves if you're in a hiring position. So fine, like the company won't let you buy the software. You know how much it costs for a pro Zoom account? I don't believe you that you can't afford it. I don't believe you. I believe you don't care about acquiring the best talent, and so you won't afford it. But like,
if you're a hiring
personally,
manager,
on my salary, I can pay for a pro Zoom account on my salary if I'm a hiring manager. That's not too expensive for me. I pay for coffee. It would cost less than that to have a pro Zoom account every day. And so it would be fine to do. And so that's why I don't buy it. It's not that free tools, there are people like, especially educators, all those kind of categories of folks that are up against a wall of bureaucracy that I would not want to fight either. But I think a thing we forget a lot of times is that in this remote work age, you are enabled to do whatever you want. You're not on their corporate network 100% of the time. You're not limited by what they're letting you do. And they don't have the bandwidth necessarily to penalize you in any real way for it because you're making results. So that's like what it's about to me, is like, can you get some results and hire a great person and deliver a great interview experience to attract the talent? There's going to be millions of people applying for jobs. You've got to just like get the barriers out of the way. If they won't buy it for you, buy it yourself and then cancel it. Like,
or take advantage of free options. In fact,
sorry.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. I love it. I think that maybe we could talk about that for just a little bit. Like, as far as, okay, I'm a small business or a startup, bootstrapping, trying to get the best people I can with the offer I have. What are some tools? They can be paid or maybe unpaid or free. That would be great to use. That would be great to be a part of your hiring process, a part of your interview process.
Yeah, so I think Zoom is great. It's free actually up to 40 minutes, so you don't need to spend any money on that, but it's a much better experience than you're going to get out of some browser-based, like free labeled generic thing. People trust it a little more. It's a known brand, but that's just like a quick opinion about that. It is free to use Zoom. It's not like you have to pay for it.
Yeah, I talk with a lot of small business owners. We trade tips and tricks and try and give each other advice. And I'm horrified by how many people have a business and are looking to hire additional full-time staff and can't write down a job description and post it on their website. And that is a huge red flag. So like, if you actually want to attract people who are have any experience whatsoever and who know their value, you need to figure out how to get that posted on your site. It doesn't matter if it's a free website hosting solution. It doesn't matter if you're using a job board system, but you need to figure out how to write down what your job requirements actually are. What is that job going to be like for that person? What do they need to do every week? And publish that publicly. And probably as the process of doing that, you're going to look at some other job descriptions. You'll probably need to revise your expectations for that position a little bit, because at a small company, you typically want you slide into this position of wishing you could hire the perfect person who is a mix of like 5 different jobs. And you're not going to find that. So then like, as you look around across other jobs, you need to like really pare it back to half of what your original ambition was. And it's fine to list like, hey, bonus if you also know 10 languages, right? Like, you can have bonus things on there, but like really pay attention to what the actual minimum requirements are for you to hire somebody and that person to be a positive for your business.
I heard a really good tip about that recently. Imagine that the person that you're hiring is going to go copy and paste that job description and put that on their LinkedIn account. Like that's what they're doing right now. I thought that was like, that's pretty clever actually. That makes you think about it. Yeah.
Oh, I think that's great. And I think too that when you're doing that, I think there are, we can go down this road too, but like there are some inherent things that people do that are just shoot themselves in the foot. Like I read it the other day. It was, I can't remember where I read it, but it was like someone like, I want the person that's the most excited to work for our company. And then it's like, okay, well then how much do you pay? Like, are you paying market or above? And they're like, oh no, we pay well below market. It's like, well, then why do you want someone that's super excited about an opportunity or your
It's
work?
ridiculous.
That's well below market. Like, that's not the person that you want.
And that's a pet peeve of mine, actually, is like people who are like, oh, I want somebody who's really passionate. People don't have to be passionate at work to do a good job. They're working because they need to stay alive. And
You
life
mean my
is
data
like,
entry job isn't art?
yeah, life is hard. You want someone who is maybe self-motivated, right? And you don't have to remind them to show up at work, but you don't. That doesn't need to be the highlight of their life.
Yeah, is that really someone that you want around the office, like, or on your Slack chat, like just blowing you up all day long? But so there's that approach, that I think small businesses, especially startups, can take. And then I think the other thing too is just using, like, whatever tools that you're using, just have make your own package of tools. So Zoom is one. I know me and Kevin earlier we were talking about. You want to expound on that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. So I just got into the beta for I don't know if this is going to break everything we're doing, but we're doing it live, so that's even a better excuse to do it. Oh, man, I broadcast at 7:20 today. I'm going to change that right now and see what happens. I can't. Okay, sorry, guys. I messed everything up. But now...
Here we go.
Live demos.
Live demos.
He had a demo already.
Oh, we might have lost your audio.
So this is a new beta video application. It's like a virtual camera.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know what was going on with that, but I'll try to do a better job later explaining. But yeah, is like a virtual camera presentation app. Super cool. I would definitely check it out. I think it fills a huge gap right now between Zoom and like PowerPoint or Keynote, where the other things, PowerPoint and Keynote, feel too heavy for what you're doing. But it feels exactly like it sounds like. It's like, this is like the right amount of juice that I need in this post-COVID world. And so I think it's great so far. And I'll try to talk more about that later when I don't have it broken.
And that beta is a free option right now, right?
It's free. Yeah, they're not charging money for it. It is watermarked, but you can take the watermark off. It's really powerful. If people aren't signed up for the beta, I definitely would sign up for it. If you're doing any kind of sharing of your screen with slides in your day-to-day life, this would be much lighter weight, and it feels like at this point it would be superior.
Oh, that's great. And I love the way that it kind of utilizes the technology.
Are we
that
talking
you
about
have.
tools?
Yeah.
We're tooling it.
Oh, I bumped. Can you guys hear me?
I can.
Earbuds, my favorite tools. You need these if you're doing remote stuff. You please put them in.
No, that's fair. Because what happens, Elliot, if you don't put those in?
You just hear so much more of the noise, and then you end up having to mute and unmute a lot more. The echo canceling has to work a lot harder, and the conversation is harder to understand.
Yeah, I think that is a thing that is so easy to miss in terms of the overwhelming nature of virtual meetings or video conferencing meetings when you are new to them. Is you're overwhelmed with the fact that, like, oh, now my sound is not coming from my body like my face is. It's coming from someplace on my computer, and like I have to move these things around and it doesn't sound right to people. Or there's like this weird thing where I've never had to decide, like, do I hear myself talk while other people talk? And so there's just these things that your brain is not used to figuring out as problems. And like Elliot said, almost everybody that has an iPhone still owns, or any kind of smartphone still owns the included earbuds. Granted, if you buy iPhone secondhand, they don't usually include those, and so that comes up. That's fine. They're not expensive though, and they make a massive difference in the quality of your meetings in terms of the actual goal, which is communicating. And so I think it can't be overstated. Just like even cheap earbuds that have a mic in them, anything that gets that microphone closer to your mouth, even if you're like, no, it can't be better. I really like it just open. It's got to sound better. Like, just put them in. It doesn't sound better for the receiver.
It's really interesting you say that. I've heard that a couple of times from different people hiring. Like, they've said the words, we had such a rough time with his audio or his video, we nearly didn't hire him. And like, they're so glad that they still went and hired him or her because, that they turned out to be a great worker. But that was like one of the first things that was influencing them, like their
Cognitively,
ability.
I shut down. Like if I hear myself echoing, I mentally shut down. If you wanted to do a psyops thing on me, all you have to do is play my own voice somehow that I can't control to get rid of it, and I'll start, like, blood will start coming out of my eyes, and I'll fall on the ground and like give up. But like, not everyone was that severe to it. But yeah, there's no way I could hire somebody if they were echoing like while I was talking to them. I would have to either lie or admit that I need a second meeting where that's not happening.
Yeah, and Neil mentioned video too. Whether you're interviewing or you're interviewing someone, or you're in a company, you're doing a lot of video conferences, it doesn't take much to get your video and your lighting somewhat presentable. And I'll just use an example real quick. So I have a light on me. I'll go ahead and shut the light off so you can see how drastic that looks. And then let's see if this works. I'll go ahead and switch from the USB webcam to just, let's see, the last.
So we lost your audio, Brandon. But yeah, that's pretty dramatic change there.
But yeah, you're right. It is something that, especially, and there is so many like workarounds that are popping up because of this issue, right? I think that people are, at first we saw people trying to get capture cards for their HDMI, to be able to get high definition audio from like maybe a DSLR that they had lying around the house into their computer. And there's a lot more sophisticated and advanced things, but honestly, I mean, now it's getting to the point where you can use like your iPhone as the camera that you have, and all you need is the lightning connector to go into your computer, a software piece of an application on the camera, and you can use that camera to have excellent video that people can, see. Elliot?
Something else to throw out there of what you should ask when you're in a remote interview. We talked about red flags earlier. Because communication is so much more work in a remote team, I really recommend politely asking, can you give me an example of a recent conflict on your team and how you helped resolve it? And that will tell you tons about what it's like to actually work in that team and how they actually treat each other.
Yeah, I love that. That is a huge thing I think that is overlooked in general in workplace kind of assessment for roles, is those less desirable moments in time that have to exist in teams where corrections are made or steering is done or postmortems are done that people don't want to quit their job over. It's one thing to like talk about what was bad, but it's another thing to have everybody gang up and blame one person. And so there's like ideas that get passed around that are useful, but then at the same time, at the interview process, it's not necessarily always a factor of like, let me be realistic and think of when this person leaves the company or when this person has to fire someone when they're promoted, how are they going to interact in that role? Yeah, that's super cool or important thing to think about.
I think something else too is setting a precedent for communication. Like, what tools are you using to communicate? What's the expected, I guess you can call it turnaround time. Like, what's your protocols? Like, what's your culture?
Does this company communicate, or do you like to communicate asynchronously, where like you're on a completely different track of things and you just catch up with the whole day? Or are you a person that like, if you don't get a response to your question, you'll forget you asked it?
I think setting that off like from the beginning is huge, especially when you're discerning if it's a real opportunity or not. Because some people, they look at that Slack indicator and they're like, okay, if that person's not on, then they're not working, and that might be the perception of the person that's interviewing you, or it might be your perception from a previous company. But setting that so if it's really an opportunity for you, I think that's a huge one.
Yeah,
I saw a blog post, an email newsletter from Kay from Rad Reads. Rad Reads is just this fantastic community site, and Kay was talking about he's hiring an assistant, and this is a remote person. So it's brand new for him, right? His business has grown to the point where he gets to hire one more person, and the thing that he did himself, and also asked the new hire to do, is wrote a mini manual, like for themselves. Like this is how I'm trying to work, and I want you to write one that's how you're trying to work. And so he has some fantastic things on there, like, hey, I'm working in Pomodoros and I turn my phone off for 25 minutes at a time. And so like I want to focus, and then I'm going to check in, and then I'm going to focus again, and then I'm going to check in. So like that means I'm not going to answer the phone when you call. I am going to get back to you quickly, but don't take that personally. And then he's also like, I'm going to thank you profusely when we speak in person. I greatly prefer speaking over the phone or speak live. I am not going to say thank you in email, and because there's too many emails. And he's like, so I'm just like, and it was like 10 lines, right? It wasn't this huge thing, but he just broke those things down, which shows the level of self-awareness. But you can imagine how much more comfortable that new employee feels interacting with him. He's the boss, and knowing like, I didn't screw up. He's not mad at me, and he's going to get back to me before the end of the day, even though he didn't answer my phone call and there is something urgent. Like, it's a fantastic thing to do.
Yeah, having those ground rules is huge. I think one of the easiest things to take wrong is those signals in this virtual context, because in person-to-person context, they're almost 100% more likely to be accurate. But even that is my opinion is starting to change about that, because people have different kind of levels of awareness or intuitiveness around how other people are feeling, and I'm just hypersensitive, I've found out in the last couple of years. But yeah, man, not knowing whether or not somebody is deliberately telling you, I am not thanking you, or that this is just their standard email etiquette is so huge.
I like that idea of a mini manifesto. Just, hey, this is what I'm about. Let's work together.
Anymore, it's probably going to be a video manifesto.
Yeah, that's fair. I like that.
I don't have time to read. I'm stuck at home. I got so much commuting to do.
Communicating.
I wanted to add that for several years, I did flooring. And one of the things I hated the most was when you would have someone right there over your shoulder watching you and hovering, and you would back up and they're right on top of you, right? It was so frustrating. And the same, I think, applies to whatever job you're doing, especially when it is some form of management. And so working remotely, people feel, it seems as though they have to micromanage and make sure, okay, is that guy at home watching Netflix, or is he actually working? And I've seen posts on Reddit where a guy actually had to take his mouse and he tied it to something to keep it moving so he could go to the restroom, because he said his boss is so strict on micromanaging that if he sees you stop for 5 minutes, they're trying to email you or message you on Slack or Discord, whatever it is. And it's ridiculous. He says, I'm not trying to cheat the company. I'm just trying to take a restroom break, for crying out loud. So there is...
Yeah, that's ridiculous. I want a new job.
Yeah, exactly. So as a company hiring remote, right, this might be new to you because of the world conditions. Maybe this isn't something that you've done for several years. You're going to have to learn to trust your employees and to figure out a way that you can make sure that work is getting accomplished without making them feel like you're babysitting them and treating them like a child, right? That they
oh yeah,
and you'll
I've
know.
heard people ask
Yeah,
sorry about that. Keep going.
you'll know when the work's not getting done. Let's be honest. Like, you don't have to sit there and watch every single movement that they make. You'll know.
Yeah, I overheard somebody explaining their take on like an adjustment to a workforce one time where everybody had been in person traditionally, and that's just like the way they had done it was all in person, and then some circumstances changed and it became extremely practical for people to start doing this stuff remotely. And some just commonly, like, everybody's reaction was like, well, how are we going to know they're really doing it? And somebody who like had actually thought through the process just asked them like, well, how did you know they were really working before? And it's like this just boom, light bulb moment of like, oh, I never actually had any real evidence they weren't just sitting at a desk. I believed that because I could see them, they were being productive, and I just want to keep believing that about this new way. But it's like so true. There's so many pockets of waste in a in-office environment that get accepted and get kind of encouraged almost. And then when you get in remote work and you experience that micromanaging kind of like, I want you constantly making noise or I won't believe that you're doing anything. It's totally not helpful to what you're actually trying to do.
I think the the next part of the hiring process, if you use it, the test project, I think that really comes in useful at that point. I know we have done it where we try and simulate a team environment. So we get them onto Slack, and we get maybe one or two other people in that Slack channel with them. So it's not just them going off into a silo and doing a job and coming back and saying, "Hey, here it's done." It almost simulates how they're going to work. They have people
the team
to ask
dynamics.
questions.
That's awesome.
Right. Yeah. They have people to ask questions from that we're not going to assume that they know exactly how to do it right away. There might be a ton of different ways to do the actual job, but that's what I believe they're looking out for as well, like how well they actually work in a team. And if they ask questions, or if they do go into a hole and go figure it out and come back again, that gives a lot of context as well.
Yeah, I like that idea.
Yeah, that's huge. I think too, is with people that are doing this, it's like if you're a small business or a startup, it's like your expectation. Maybe you had an expectation where somebody is doing this and going to be in person with you in your small office or in your workspace, but you're not having that. I think there is also something to be said about instead of micromanaging, but just like have a check-in. Like it's cool to have a check-in. It's cool to like talk with the people that you work with and be like, oh, hey, you know what? Like for the next 20 minutes, like let's just have our Zoom screen up or our Skype screen, whatever we're using. And let's just like work and chat while we work. And then, you know what? And even if it's just a conversation, like let's have that. And then, we can disconnect and both go do onto the tasks that we need to do.
I totally agree. One thing I really appreciate about Elliot is Elliot regularly will jump on our communication channel, whatever it is. It used to be Slack, now it's Discord, and say like, hey, like, does people have time for a sync? And sure, there's an aspect of that if it's happening constantly is really obnoxious. But he doesn't do it in an obnoxious way. It's not a common all the time thing. But that willingness to always sync up with people and just like get the words out and get the conditions described and get it out of your head and out of a theory and real and communicated is a big relief sometimes when maybe it's been a kind of a stuck week. And I think in the remote interview setting, that team dynamics aspect that Neil was talking about, it becomes so crucial that it's not about, does this person know how to get up every day and sit in front of their computer, and can I believe they're going to do that? It's like, well, what are the hard things that come up in this kind of work, and how do we as a team currently interact with solving those, and are they going to be able to get on board with that or not? It's irrelevant, like, in so many other ways, what's happening in their life, but the tools around that are sometimes enabled by the culture of the company, right? And so having a company culture that is willing to just have ad hoc meetings or does not feel like they're going to be judged if their ad hoc meeting goes poorly is I think is crucial to getting people into a better working condition after you've hired them. Because like those difficult things and that awkwardness that can happen on a team, if nobody's willing to just sync with you and get you on the same page, you stay in that and you kind of gestate in it, and it can just make a job miserable as opposed to really enjoyable, even though it's remote.
You mean every meeting? Sorry, go ahead, Elliot.
That's something that is maybe kind of a new thing for people who are breaking into tech, right? And so maybe they've had other office type work before, but maybe they're new to working actually at a place that is developing technology. And you can get this idea if you've worked in other jobs that like you get trained and then you go make widgets and you go like run the process, and you should not run into any problems, right? You're just going to make 10 widgets a day, and that's that. But when you're doing a support role or a customer facing role or developing technology, operating a product, running a SaaS business, every single day something's broken, and it's something that you've never seen before, and it's tons of problem solving. And so that can be a totally new experience for people. They can feel like that they are failing everywhere when really like, oh no, you're just like, we knew you were going to hit some new problems. We haven't seen those problems either. And so it's important in your interview process, especially if you're hiring people who are doing career transitions, if it's a more entry-level role, you communicate that as well so that people don't burn out, on their first week on the job.
Yeah, I love that. Awesome.
Looks like we got a question here. We'll answer this question. We'll do a little lightning round on it, and then we're going to move on to a new segment too today. It'll be a surprise. So let's go with this question. Kevin Smith asks, he says, with remote work, it seems like there will be a merger of how freelancers or independent contractors are treated. And he asks us a question. So what do we think about this? I see Elliot's fingers.
All right. So Venkatesh Rao writes this newsletter called Art of the Gig. It's about indie work, gig work. And this week's issue is talking about the total failure of management as a profession as one of the reasons we are seeing so many people do freelance or start small businesses, indie businesses. So I don't think we're necessarily going to see a merger. I think we are going to see a huge amount of middle managers get fired because they're not adding any value to the process.
Yeah, I have to agree. And I think more and more you're going to see people who are freelancers level up in their business prowess and not take any kind of mistreatment from companies. They're going to give the companies a serious run for their money when it comes to the procurement process, because everybody that is kind of trying to be excellent gets tired of companies, bureaucracies getting in their way. And so when people are forced to not be in the same place, they're forced to be at the schedule that they're at because of this COVID stuff. Currently, it might be something else after COVID, but just because of that mind shift, they're not going to have to negotiate on, am I in the same place at the same time that you want me? It's just not going to be of value to the company anymore, and they're going to get a lot of leverage from already being prepared in that state, whereas everyone being, used to these sort of boxes having to be checked. If I'm used to shopping locally and suddenly I have competition from around the world, that's a huge difference,
That's huge. I like it.
I think that too with freelance and independent contractors, and this is a personal opinion kind of, but you oftentimes, I feel like you get better quality work out of them, because when you think about like an hourly employee, right, that maybe they're milking the clock because they're getting paid either way. But with a freelancer and an independent contractor, you hire them on, like it's kind of like piecework, right? They're getting paid by the job that they're doing. So that's a motivation for them to work hard, get that job done, get that paycheck, and then go on to the next job, whatever it may be, whether it's for the same company or a different company, right? So there is, in my opinion, there's a possibility that you are getting a better result. I mean, unless they're rushing through.
I agree. Kevin pointed out that like it's generally results oriented in his experience, and I think that's going to become more and more true. That people are going to look at value added. They're going to look at like, what are you actually delivering for me? And like, there's a big difference between implementation and consulting. But like Blair Enns says, if you can't in 20 minutes deliver, or 30 minutes deliver 20 insights about a topic that I also care about, then you're not really an expert about it. And so there's going to be a clear difference between expert freelance work and the outcomes you can get and the amount of guidance you have to provide, and employee work all the time, because it's totally different in nature. Some of it's thought work and some of it is implementation. But at the same time, I don't see anybody who's freelance or independent having a disadvantage in this current situation.
Real quick, Myles, I know we're running short on time, but I share a quick story that I think ties everything in together. And we had talked about this earlier. So this would tie in micromanaging and, independent contractors, employees. So just because you're not micromanaging and hovering over somebody and watching their every move, doesn't mean that they're working, right? There is an example of a guy that worked for a huge corporation, and this is in the news quite a few years back. But anyway, long story short, he was showing up for work every single day and not being micromanaged. And his employers were like, oh, wow, he's getting all of his work done. Good for him. Well, it turns out he was subcontracting all of his workflow out to another company based in an entirely different country. And they were delivering all of his work to him, and he was paying them like a third of whatever his pay was. And so this proves multiple things here. Just because you're not micromanaging, or you are, doesn't mean that your employee is being productive. And also proves that, hey, remote work is fantastic and it can deliver great results, because everything that company hired him to do was being done remotely by other people, and they had no idea. And in fact, they were giving him promotions and raises because of the quality there. So anyway, I love that story. I thought it
Oh,
Yeah, it's really food for thought that like some of the barriers are in our mind, not in the reality of the work.
That's awesome. I think that's a great way to wrap up our conversation. We are running towards the end of our time here, but let's do a quick lightning round, like a conclusion segment, if you will. Things you're into. What are you into now? Elliot, I'm looking at you because I think you're into some pretty interesting stuff these days.
Today I'm excited about the Edelkrone slider. I've got a little Bluetooth remote for it. So if you are doing photography stuff, if you're doing video stuff, they make these motorized sliders that move your camera back and forth automatically. And I just think that's cool. Edelkrone.
That's awesome. Brandon, what are you into? Oh,
you're muted, Brandon.
Yeah.
It looks like he's talking about Tic Tacs.
Yeah, we see what you're into.
Hey, man, those Tic Tacs look good.
Killing that breath. I hear you. How about you, Kevin?
I'm genuinely really excited about because I've heard so much hype about it, and so many other people have opinions because they've used it, and now I get to have a real opinion about it. And right now, I feel like you should go sign up for the beta. I might say something different next week about it, but yeah, if you use PowerPoint or you use what's the other one? Oh, Keynote. If you use those in your stuff, try to get an invite to.
Yeah, get on there, get on the beta, try to make it crash. Neil?
I'm into wildernesses at the moment. I just spent 6 days in one, and I think everyone should get outside and get into a wilderness that's near you. I love
it. What's the name of your wilderness?
The Bob Marshall Wilderness. Over 1 million square acres, I think is the correct.
And just there, but you're not talking about golf, right?
No, not talking about golf. No. There was a point in my 6-day hike that I was 50 miles on all directions away from a real road or car.
Well, that's a reality check.
It was beautiful.
That's beautiful. I love it. I'll end the quick round here of quick picks. I'm going to recommend Connections on Netflix. I don't think a lot of people have seen it for some reason, but maybe I could be completely wrong about that. But it's fantastic. Just Google Banford's Law, and your mind is going to be blown. So I definitely suggest that. But yeah, that'll be it for our show today. Thanks for everyone for joining us. Neil, thank you so much for joining us. It's awesome to be able to speak with you, and always a pleasure. And if you're watching online right now at this very moment, why don't you join us? I'm sure you have some really cool things to say about some of the things we've been talking about. There's a Discord link that we posted in the chat. It's going to be good for a short time. So join us, talk to us, be our friends. We're real people, and we promise we're not going to, try to, sell your data and harvest it to make ends meet. And then with that, though, we again want